How's it going, everyone? This is George here, and today we are going to be reviewing Ant-Man. This is the 2015 Marvel Cinematic Universe film directed by Peyton Reed. This came out after Avengers Age of Ultron and was the conclusion of Phase 2, the film before Captain America Civil War. And this film starred Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, Michael Douglas, Corey Stoll, and Michael Pena. And in this film, we are introduced to Scott Lang, who Paul Rudd plays. He's a criminal, he's a crook, but he also is a loving father. He loves his daughter Cassie, and she thinks the world of him. And so he also gets tangled up into this mess where he's got to help Hank Pym, played by Michael Douglas, perform this heist to prevent Pym technology from going into the wrong hands. So this film was originally going to be directed by Edgar Wright. This was before the MCU and all that. And really Wright left the project around 2014. Like this film was set to be in the MCU despite Edgar Wright being attached to this film for a long time. But in 2014, um creative differences as usual with certain Marvel directors caused Edgar Wright to leave the project, although he still has a screenplay credit. And so Peyton Reed came and took over. But yet, despite all that, they still managed to make this film work. This is still a pretty good, entertaining Marvel Cinematic Universe film. It's not the best Marvel Cinematic Universe film, and we'll get into why pretty soon. But despite the production problems that this movie had, this was not another Thor the Dark World situation where where the director left and they got someone else and they made all these last minute decisions. This movie was still able to be very good. It's a fun origin story. Ton of story of how Scott Lang becomes Ant-Man, how he's learning to utilize the PIM technology, and it's also a father-daughter story. Basically, this is about Scott Lang trying to be a better better father to his daughter Cassie. Sorry, but that's not the only father-daughter relationship going on around here. You have Hank Pym trying to like reconnect with his daughter Hope, played by Evangeline Lilly, very well, and we learn why that relationship is pretty rocky. So you really have two different father-daughter relationships happening in this film and the journey that they go through in that movie. Michael Pena is hilarious as the character Luis. Tells some very hilarious stories. Probably gives some of the best humor in the MCU. I enjoy the character personally. The visual work is also very good. Like this is definitely where you see them starting to step up visually with their movies. Particularly when Scott Lang's working with the ants. So the visual work is very good. The action's very entertaining. Not as much action as some of the other MCU movies. Like if you look at where Ant-Man is placed in the MCU, like the last three movies that came out before it were Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Avengers: Age of Ultron. There was a lot of action in those movies. The next movie that came out afterwards was Captain America: Civil War. A lot of action in that movie. But I like that this is a smaller scale MCU movie. It feels bef- like we had quite a few big event MCU movies before that, and then we had another one in Captain America: Civil War. And for the most part, Ant Man is in its own little corner in the MCU. Outside of briefly mentioning the Avengers, the beginning of the film, we see Howard Stark, we see Agent Carter at the beginning. We also have Anthony Mackie returning as Falcon, Sam Wilson fighting Ant Man at one point in the film. But overall, it does a pretty good job of being in its own corner of the MCU, being standalone, despite some of those mentions and some of those brief appearances from other MCU characters. Now, the reason why I don't think this is a perfect movie, despite all the praise I'm giving it, although I do want to bring up before I forget, the de aging on Michael Douglas looked really good in this film. Like they did a really good job of that, and also Michael Douglas does a pretty good job as Hank Pym as well. The performances were pretty good overall in this movie, but this is not a perfect movie, like I said. While it does the themes of family well, and being a heist film like an MCU heist movie, it's very MCU formulaic. Like if you watch this movie, you can tell there's a lot of similarities between this film and the first Iron Man film, where a large portion of this origin story, this like first movie for this character is dedicated to them learning how to use their new technology, new powers. Basically the villain is kind of similar. Darren Cross, played by Corey Stoll. Not the best villain. He feels kind of similar to Obadiah Stane in the first Iron Man film, and they're trying to like take the company for themselves, try to take the technology for themselves, kind of thing. Holding a grudge against the person in charge of the company, the CEO. And also the end, like at the end of the film, they finally get the suit that's similar to the suit of the protagonist, and they have their final fight. I think the first Iron Man film did it better with Obadiah Stane compared to Yellow Jacket in this film. Like I don't know, the villain just felt very dull. Like the Yellow Jacket suit looks cool. Like I think it looks really cool, but I mean you really only see it at in the final fight. And Darren Cross, there's really nothing special. Like you understand his motivations, you understand why he holds a grudge against Hank Pym and all that, but he's nothing special. Just like just a meh MCU villain. And while Peyton Reed did a pretty good job overall, I felt like had this movie been directed by Edgar Wright, and maybe it's because I'm a fan of Edgar Wright's work. I love movies like Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I felt like maybe this movie could have like been less MCU formulaic, less MCU cookie cutter, and could have been more unique in its own way. And to me, those tend to be the MCU movies that are more rememberable, that are more enjoyable for me. The MCU movies that I like the most. But overall, despite my criticisms, I still like this movie very much. It's one of the funniest MCU movies. It's also one of the most heartfelt MCU movies because again, it's also about Scott Lang trying to be a better father to his daughter, trying to be the hero that she sees him as despite the crimes that he has committed in the past, despite what all the other adults say about him. Um, Michael Douglas, it's great to see him in the MCU. See, most of the actors are pretty good. Good, although the villain, like I said, the villain's pretty forgettable. But the visual work and the action's very entertaining to watch. And I love that we can get these smaller scale MCU movies. Not every superhero movie, not every MCU movie has to be like this big event, world ending movie. Sometimes, like the smaller stuff, we can have some smaller stuff every now and then. Especially because, like I said, this movie came out right after Avengers Age of Ultron and before Captain America Civil War. So it was a little nice break to have in between these two big event MCU movies that would have our core MCU characters like Iron Man and Captain America involved. So overall, I'm gonna give the first Ant-Man film a B plus. I enjoy this movie very much. It's definitely one of the more rewatchable MCU movies. Not one of the best though. I just wish it was more unique and wasn't that's all that similar to the first Iron Man film. Like I said, I just wish things worked out between Marvel and Edgar Wright. But what are your thoughts on the first Ant-Man film? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what's one of your favorite MCU solo movies or origin movies? To me, the first Iron Man is still my favorite. Let me know in the comments down below. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share this with someone that likes the Ant-Man movies, that likes MCU movies. I hope to see you guys real soon. I'm going to be reviewing Ant-Man the Wasp later this week, right before Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumanium comes out. So in the meantime, take care, everyone.